Hey there, how are you? It's Mira. Welcome back to my channel. I've just finished reading The Cast Table by Michael Ondaatje and can't wait to share my thoughts on it with you. The book is about a 3-week journey on an ocean liner called Ondaatje. The 11-year-old narrator, Michael, is traveling by himself on the ship from his home in what was then Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, to England. In the ship's hierarchical setting, Michael is assigned to eat his meal at the cast table, which is the furthest from the captain's table and is often referred to as the least privileged place. At the cast table, Michael finds 2 new companions, 2 boys of his age, the rebellious Cassius and the introspective Ramadan. And the strange adults at the cast table include a silent tailor, a pianist who claims to have hit the skids, a retired ship dismantler, a botanist who has a garden deep in the hold with all kinds of plants, including some poisonous ones, and a mysterious and independent woman called Miss Lasketti who hides pigeons in the pockets of her jacket and is said to have some links with the Whitehall. So for the 3 boys, the Ondaatje is where they find themselves for the first time by necessity in close quarters with adults. And they quickly realize that the insignificant status of the cast table actually gives them a lot of freedom because, for boys of their age who are at the cast table, they are almost completely invisible and they can go to places others cannot go to. And also they establish themselves one rule, which is to do at least one thing that is forbidden each day. They also learn from their adventures that what is interesting and important happens mostly in secret, in places where there is no power. And beyond the cast table, Michael also encounters her beautiful 17-year-old cousin Emily, whom he hasn't seen for 2 years. There's also a famous philanthropist who is dying from rabies, a baron who turns out to be a thief and possibly a child molester, and a half-deaf girl called Assumpta, and perhaps most thrilling of all, a shackled prisoner being transported to London for trial. So these are just some of the characters that appear in this novel. And for me, I don't want to spoil too much of the plot, but for me, the first half of the story is kind of slow with too many characters and their seemingly unrelated anecdotes. But as the story unfolds, those seemingly disparate threads begin to intertwine and they begin to reveal the intricate connections between the characters. The second half of the book takes on a more suspenseful tone as those hidden secrets and past traumas of these characters come to light. And the atmosphere becomes darker. The whispers of gossip that Michael and his friends eagerly gathered reach a climax beyond their wildest imaginations. And this isn't just a story of a childhood voyage. It goes much deeper than that. It's also about what was seen and experienced on the ocean liner leave their mark long after the journey ends. The 11-year-old Michael from the cast table has become a successful novelist who finds himself with a cold-blooded self-sufficiency. The mischievous troublemaker Cassius has become a painter. His London exhibition showcases dozens of works, all about a single night from the Ondaatje journey when the ship paused at the Suez Canal. And according to the narrator, that is the night when the boys came to understand that small and important thing, that our lives could be large with interesting strangers who would pass us without any personal involvement. And Ramadan, the most cautious one among the 3 boys, dies at a young age. But for me, it is the female characters in this novel that impress me the most. Miss Lasketti, Emily, and Assumpta, each with their own secrets, desires, and destinies. Miss Lasketti once had an affair with a wealthy man in her 20s. In her own words, she got into trouble in the early days until something happened that allowed her to save herself. And that is why she wants to protect Emily from a similarly dangerous relationship on board the Ondaatje. And Emily, in turn, is drawn into peril because of her empathy towards Assuntha, that half-deaf girl who wants to help her imprisoned father escape. Emily believes that Assuntha, like herself back in Ceylon, is caught up with her father's life. So I think, the destinies of these three female characters are kind of intertwined. And I think they're all independent female characters challenging social norms in their pursuit of freedom. But Ondaatje doesn't cast them as heroes or glorify recklessness. I think what's most fascinating about his works is that he never makes judgments. He just presents the multifaceted nature of human experience and relationship. He just reveals their motivations, desires, weaknesses, and flaws, leaving it for us to empathize with their struggles and make our own interpretations. In Miss Lascetti's letter to Emily, she quotes Irish writer Samuel Beckett's words, "Despair young and never look back," saying that's what she did as well. And I think Emily has some similar comments when she reconnects with Michael years later in Canada. She says, "We all became adults before we were adults." So in a sense, this is a journey from childhood to the adult world. And in an interview, Ondaatje said that if Tolstoy, Conrad, and Coetzee had not preempted him, he would have called this novel Youth. The cast table was inspired by a similar journey by Michael Ondaatje in his childhood. He was also traveling from Colombo to London by himself when he was 11 years old, but he claims in an author's note that although this novel sometimes uses the coloring and locations of memoir and autobiography, the cast table is fictional. However, he does admit that the process of writing fiction involves discovering elements of the writer himself. So I think Ondaatje's life experience from Sri Lanka to England and then to Canada has a huge impact on his writing. And he said he's always interested in how people from the East live in the West. So in The English Patient, it was the bomb disposal expert Kip, who comes from India and works for the British Army. And in the cast table, he writes about a voyage from Ceylon to England with many of the characters leaving their homeland to live in another country. And I think there's a scene where Emily tells Michael in their reunion that she feels people like them don't belong anywhere. Now I'd like to share a few excerpts from this book. You can tell me in the comments if you like the writing style of this novel. So this is Michael recalling her childhood back in Ceylon. What was I in those days? I recall no outside imprint, and therefore no perception of myself. If I had to invent one photograph of myself from childhood, it would be of a barefoot boy in shorts and a cotton shirt, with a couple of friends from the village running along the mildewed wall that separated the house and garden in Barbalaskamua from the traffic on the high-level road. Or it would be of me alone, waiting for them, looking away from the house to the dusty street. Who realizes how contented feral children are? The grasp of the family fell away as soon as I was out the door. Though among ourselves we must have been trying to understand and piece together the adult world, wondering what was going on there and why. But once we climbed the gangplank onto the Ondaatje, we were for the first time by necessity in close quarters with our doubts. And this is from Miss Lascetti's letter to Emily, a letter that she never had the chance to give to her. And she was writing about her affair with a wealthy man in her 20s. I was very young the first time he spoke to me. The thing is that men with the kind of power that comes with money and knowledge assume the universe. It allows them an easy wisdom. But such people close doors on you. Within such a universe, there are codes, rooms you must not enter. In their daily life, there is always a cup of blood somewhere. He was aware of that. Horace Johnson knew the kind of animal he was writing. There's a brutality that comes with such knowledge. I didn't know it then, not that afternoon when he steered me into the grand rotunda, holding just my elbow, and with that same hand lifted the corner of the tapestry as if it was a servant's skirt, to reveal the bright underside. I continued living in that world for 3 seasons, and eventually discovered I did not control any of the paths I thought I had freely chosen. I was unaware of the trapdoors and moats among the rich. I was unaware that a man like Horace treated even those he loved and those he desired to have in his presence in the same way that he must have treated his enemies, placing them where there was no chance of retaliation. At the bottom of the last page she had written years earlier, Mrs. Getty added a note. "Where are you, dear Emily? Will you send me your address or write to me? I wrote this to give to you during our time on the Ondaatje because, as I said, I had become aware that like me in my youth, you were under someone's spell, and I thought I could save you. I'd seen you with Sunil from the Jackal troop, and it seemed you were caught up in something dangerous. But I never gave it to you. I feared, I don't know, all these years I have wondered about you, if you got free. I know that I became for a while dark and bitter to myself, till I escaped that circular state. Despair young and never look back, an Irishman has said, and this is what I did." Well, that's all I got for the cast table. Have you ever read this novel? Or have you ever had a childhood experience that shaped your life? Please feel free to leave me a comment. And that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon.